The medical facility on Zephyr Prime was quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems. In a white room with no windows, two figures sat across from each other at a simple metal table. One was tall and thin with pale blue skin and 4 arms. The other looked like a giant insect walking on 2 legs, with dark green armor covering most of his body. Vexthel shifted in his chair, the movement causing small clicking sounds from his shell. His large compound eyes reflected the bright lights above them. Scars crossed his face and arms, telling stories of battles fought across the galaxy. Some were fresh, still healing from the war that had ended just months ago. Others were old, from conflicts that seemed simple compared to what he had recently experienced. Dr. Kethver, the military historian, placed a small recording device on the table between them. His blue fingers moved carefully as he activated the machine. "Commander Vexthel, thank you for agreeing to this interview. Your experiences during the human war will be valuable for our historical records." Vexthel made a sound that might have been laughter, but it came out as a harsh clicking noise. "Historical records," he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. "Is that what we are calling it now, the human war?" "The official name is the Terra-Zephyrian conflict," Dr. Kethver said, consulting his notes. "But many veterans refer to it as you do." The old commander leaned back in his chair, his armor scraping against the metal. "Call it what you want. It does not change what happened. It does not change what we learned about them." Dr. Kethver activated another device, this one projecting a holographic star map above the table. Dozens of red dots marked battle sites across several sectors of space. "Let us start from the beginning. What did you know about humans before first contact?" Vexthel stared at the red dots for a long moment. Each one represented a battle, a loss, a moment when everything the Zephyrian Empire thought they knew about warfare proved wrong. "We knew almost nothing," he admitted. The scout reports described them as a primitive species. They had barely left their homeworld. No faster-than-light travel, no energy weapons, no real military to speak of. The Galactic Council classified them as a Class C civilization, Dr. Kethver noted. "Yes," Vexthel clicked his mandibles together, a sign of agitation. "Class C, barely space-capable. The Council recommended standard first-contact protocols, cultural exchange, trade agreements, gradual integration into galactic society." The historian paused his recording. "But that is not what happened." "No," Vexthel said quietly, "that is not what happened at all." The commander stood up and walked to the wall, his claws clicking on the smooth floor. The Empire had different plans. Earth sat in a strategic location, right on the edge of the Outer Rim territories. The High Command decided it would make an excellent forward base for expansion into unexplored space. And the humans? Dr. Kethver asked, though he already knew the answer. They were in the way. Vexthel turned back to face the historian. The plan was simple: show them our superior technology, demand their surrender, establish a garrison on their world. Standard operating procedure for dealing with primitive species. Dr. Kethver made notes on his tablet. "You were given command of the expedition fleet." "I was honored," Vexthel said, but there was no pride in his voice. 12 battle cruisers, 40 destroyers, and 200 support vessels. The largest single fleet ever assembled by the Empire at that time. High Command wanted to make sure the humans understood the futility of resistance. The hologram changed, showing the solar system that contained Earth. The planet appeared as a small blue dot, seemingly insignificant among the stars. "What were your first impressions when you arrived in their system?" Vexthel returned to his chair, his movements slower now, as if the memories were weighing him down. "Their world was beautiful," he said. "Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. It reminded me of the old stories about Zephyr Prime before the great industrial expansion. But that was not what caught my attention. What did? The debris." The commander's voice grew distant. "There was so much debris in orbit around their planet. Thousands of pieces of metal and machinery, all spinning in complex patterns. At first, I thought it was waste from their primitive space program. I was wrong. Dr. Kethver leaned forward. What was it? Weapons, Vextel said simply. Thousands of weapons, all pointed outward, all waiting. They had covered their entire planet with orbital defense platforms. Primitive by our standards. But there were so many of them. The historian made more notes. But surely your fleet could have destroyed them easily. That is what I thought, Vextel agreed. I opened communications with their government. I followed standard protocol. I informed them that their world was now under the protection of the Zephyrian Empire. I explained that resistance was futile. I offered them terms of surrender, and their response? Vextel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. They laughed at us. The recording device continued to hum in the silence that followed. Dr. Kethver waited patiently, knowing that his patient needed time to process the memories. The human who spoke to. U.S. was named President William Hayes, Vextel continued. He was old, with gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes. He looked tired, but when he spoke, his voice was strong. He told us that Earth had been preparing for this day for 50 years. He said they had been watching us through their deep space. Telescopes, learning about our ships, our weapons, our tactics. 50 years? Dr. Kethver repeated. But first contact was only made 3 years ago. They had been watching us long before we knew they existed, Vextel explained. They had seen our expansion into neighboring systems. They had witnessed our conquests of other worlds. They knew we would come for them eventually. The commander stood up again, pacing around the small room. President Hayes told us something that day that I did not understand until much later. He said that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. He said they had learned lessons that we had never needed to learn. He said that if we wanted their world, we would have to take it. And what did you do? Vextel stopped pacing and looked directly at the historian. I did what any rational commander would do. I gave the order to attack. I thought it would be over in minutes. He returned to his chair and sat down heavily. That was my first mistake. I thought I was fighting a primitive species. I was not. I was fighting something far more dangerous than any advanced civilization in the galaxy. What was that? I was fighting a species that had never forgotten how to fight. Dr. Kethver adjusted the recording device and settled back in his chair. The holographic display showed the human solar system, with tiny markers representing the massive Zephyrian fleet that had arrived 3 years ago. Tell me about the first battle, Commander. Vextel's compound eyes seemed to dim as he stared at the projection. The first battle, he repeated slowly. We called it the Battle of the Outer Markers. The humans had different names for it. They called it the Day of Fire. The alien commander reached across the table and touched the hologram controls. The display zoomed in to show the edge of the solar system, where several small objects orbited in the darkness beyond the furthest planet. These were their early warning stations, primitive constructions, barely larger than escape pods. We detected them easily. Standard procedure would be to destroy them, Dr. Kethver noted. Yes, Vextel agreed. But I was curious. I wanted to see what kind of technology these humans possessed. I ordered my ships to capture one of the stations intact. The hologram shifted again, showing the approach of Zephyrian vessels toward one of the small human outposts. What did you find? The station was empty when we boarded it, Vextel said. Or so we thought. Inside, we found basic life support systems, primitive computers, and what appeared to be observation equipment. Nothing that seemed threatening. The commander paused, his claws clicking against the table. But there was something else. Something we did not recognize at first. The entire station was filled with small metal objects, each no larger than my claw. They were attached to every surface, hidden in every corner. Dr. Kethver made notes on his tablet. What were they? Explosives, Vextel said simply. Thousands of them. The humans had turned their entire monitoring station into a weapon. When my boarding party triggered the detonation, it destroyed not only the station, but also the heavy cruiser that was docked to it. The historian looked up from his notes. They sacrificed their own people? No, Vextel shook his head. That was what made it so disturbing. The station was automated. No humans died in the explosion. They had built it specifically to destroy anyone who tried to capture it. They had prepared for us. The hologram changed again, showing the positions of the Zephyrian fleet as they advanced toward the inner solar system. What happened next? Should have been more careful, Vexthal admitted. But the loss of one cruiser seemed insignificant compared to the size of my fleet. I ordered the advance to continue. We would show these humans the price of resistance. The commander stood up and walked around the table, his movements agitated. The human fleet met us at the orbit of their fourth planet. A red world, they called. Mars. I expected to see a few dozen primitive ships, perhaps 100 at most. How many were there? Over 3,000 vessels, Vexthal said, his voice carrying a note of disbelief even after all this time. Ships of every size and design. Some were military vessels, but many were civilian craft that had been converted for war. Cargo ships, with weapons welded to their hulls. Passenger liners filled with missiles, even small personal craft carrying single bombs. Dr. Kethver stopped writing. 3,000? But the intelligence reports said they had no significant military. The intelligence reports were wrong, Vexthal replied. We learned later that the humans had been building ships in secret for decades. Hidden shipyards on their moon and asteroid belts, even in orbit around their gas giant planets. They had been preparing for this war long before we knew they existed. The hologram now showed the two fleets facing each other in the darkness of space. The Zephyrian formation was orderly and disciplined, with battle cruisers at the front and support vessels protected in the rear. The human fleet appeared chaotic, with ships scattered across a wide area in no recognizable pattern. Their commander was Captain Jake Morrison, Vexthal continued. He commanded from a ship called the Liberty. It was one of their larger vessels, but still primitive compared to our technology. I opened communications with him, expecting him to surrender when he saw the size of our fleet. Did he surrender? No, Vexthal said, returning to his chair. He did something that no civilized commander would ever do. He told me that if we wanted to take their world, we would have to go through him and every human in space. Then he cut the communication and ordered his fleet to attack. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the beginning of the battle. I was not concerned at first. Their weapons were primitive, their ships were slow, and they were badly outnumbered. A standard engagement would have been over in minutes. But it was not a standard engagement, Dr. Kethver observed. No, Vexthal agreed. The humans did not fight like any species we had encountered before. They did not try to match our formations or engage us in proper battle lines. Instead, they swarmed us like insects. The hologram showed the chaotic movement of the human fleet as thousands of small ships raced toward the Zephyrian formation. They used their numbers to overwhelm our targeting systems. While our computers were trying to track one ship, 10 more would slip past our defenses. Surely your superior weapons gave you an advantage? Our weapons were designed for fighting other civilized species, Vexthal explained. Large ships with heavy armor that could withstand multiple hits. The humans sent us ships that were destroyed by a single blast from our smallest guns, but they did not care about losses. The commander's voice grew quieter. I watched them sacrifice entire squadrons just to get one ship close enough to ram one of our destroyers. They turned their own vessels into guided missiles with crews that knew they would not survive the impact. Dr. Kethver looked up from his notes. They committed suicide attacks? Not suicide, Vexthal corrected. Sacrifice. There is a difference. Suicide is the act of someone who has given up hope. These humans had not given up. They were fighting for something they believed was worth dying for. The hologram showed the progression of the battle, with human ships breaking through the Zephyrian lines and attacking the larger vessels from multiple angles. Their tactics made no sense from a military perspective. They wasted resources, ignored proper formations, and accepted casualties that would have broken any other species. But they were effective, devastatingly so, Vexthal admitted. By The end of the engagement, I had lost over half my fleet. Ships that had survived dozens of battles against advanced civilizations were destroyed by primitive vessels held together with metal plates and determination. The commander stood up again, pacing to the far wall. But the worst part was not the losses. It was the realization that came afterward. Captain Morrison had not been trying to defeat my fleet. He had been trying to learn from it. Learn what? How we fought, how our weapons worked, how our ships moved and responded to commands. Every attack his people made was designed to gather information about our capabilities. Vexthal turned back to face the historian. Lieutenant Amy Carter, his tactical officer, had been recording everything. Every weapon signature, every defensive maneuver, every command frequency we used. Intelligence gathering, Dr. Kethver. Noted. More than that, Vexthal said. They were studying us like scientists to study a new species. They were learning our weaknesses, our patterns, our habits. Captain Morrison lost that battle, but he gave the humans something far more valuable than victory. What was that? Knowledge, Vexthal replied. Knowledge of how to fight us. Knowledge of how to hurt us. Knowledge of how to win the next battle. The commander returned to his chair and sat down heavily. As I watched the surviving human ships retreat deeper into their solar system, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake. I had assumed that because they were primitive, they were also stupid. I had assumed that because they were outnumbered, they were also outmatched. But they were not? No, Vexthal said, his voice barely above a whisper. They were learning. And humans, I discovered, are very good at learning from their mistakes, much better than we ever were. The recording device continued to hum in the silence that followed, capturing the weight of memories that had haunted the alien commander for months. Outside the medical facility, the twin suns of Zephyr Prime were setting, casting long shadows across the sterile white room where one warrior tried to explain to another how everything they thought they knew about war had been proven wrong by a species that should have been easy to defeat. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing a green planet surrounded by construction platforms and orbital stations. Dr. Kethver studied the image while Vexthal remained silent, his compound eyes reflecting the soft light from the projection. This is New Haven, the historian said, reading from his notes. The first human colony world beyond their solar system. Yes, Vexthal replied, his voice carrying a heaviness that had not been there before. Their first attempt at expansion. A beautiful world, much like their Earth but smaller. They had been building there for only 10 years when we arrived. The commander reached forward and touched the hologram controls. The image zoomed in to show the planet's surface, revealing cities that looked different from anything in Zephyrian. Space. The buildings were low and spread out, connected by roads and surrounded by green farmland. It should have been easy to take, he continued. A new colony, barely established with perhaps a few 100,000 civilians. But it was not easy, Dr. Kethver observed. Nothing about fighting humans was ever easy, Vexthal said. After the battle at Mars, High Command decided that ground invasion would be more effective than space combat. They reasoned that humans might be clever in space, but on the ground, our superior technology and training would give us the advantage. The hologram shifted to show Zephyrian dropships approaching the planet's surface. I was given command of the ground forces as well as the orbital fleet. 200,000 of our finest soldiers, equipped with the most advanced weapons and armor in the galaxy. What was your strategy? Standard siege protocol, Vexthal explained. Surround the major population centers, demand surrender, and if they refused, begin systematic destruction until they agreed to our terms. We had done it successfully on dozens of worlds. The commander stood up and walked to the window, though there was nothing to see outside except the sterile walls of the medical facility. The human leader on New Haven was Colonel Ben Hayes. He was the brother of their president, sent to establish and defend the colony. When I contacted him to demand surrender, he gave me the same answer his brother had given. He refused? He did more than refuse, Vexthal said, turning back to face the historian. He told me that if we wanted New Haven, we would have to dig it out of the ground piece by piece. At the time, I thought he was speaking metaphorically. The hologram changed again, showing the deployment of Zephyrian forces around the human settlements. What happened when you began the siege? The first thing we noticed was that the humans had been preparing for us, Vexthal replied. Every building had been reinforced. Every road had been blocked or mined. Every open space had been turned into a killing field. The commander returned to his chair, his movements slower now, but that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was that there were no civilians. Dr. Kethver looked up from his notes. No civilians? Where were they? Gone, Vexthal said simply. Evacuated. But not in the way we expected. Dr. Lisa Grant, their colony administrator, had organized something we had never seen before. The entire civilian population had been moved underground. The hologram showed a cross-section view of the planet's surface, revealing an extensive network of tunnels and underground chambers. They had been building a second city beneath the first one. For 10 years, every construction project on the surface had been matched by excavation below ground. An underground city? More than that, Vexthal explained. An underground fortress. They had moved their entire population into tunnels and chambers that were deeper and more complex than anything we had imagined. Factories, farms, hospitals, schools, all hidden beneath the surface. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the true extent of the underground network. But they did not just hide. They continued to resist from below. Every time we secured a surface building, humans would emerge from hidden entrances and attack us from behind. Guerrilla warfare. Dr. Kethver noted. We had no experience with such tactics, Vexthal admitted. In civilized warfare, armies meet in open battle. There are rules, protocols, accepted methods of engagement. The humans ignored all of these. The hologram showed the progression of the siege, with Zephyrian forces slowly advancing through the human settlements while being constantly harassed by attacks from unexpected directions. They used the terrain against us. They knew every tunnel, every hidden passage, every weak point in our formations. How long did the siege last? 3 months, Vexthal said, his voice growing quiet. 3 months of constant fighting. We would take a building during the day, only to find it reoccupied by humans during the night. We would clear a street only to have it mined while we slept. The commander stood up again, pacing around the small room. The human soldiers were led by Sergeant Kevin Torres. He was young, barely old enough to be considered an adult by their standards. But he understood warfare in ways that our most experienced generals did not. What made him different? He thought like a human, Vexthal explained. He did not fight to win battles. He fought to make us lose them. Every engagement was designed to cost us more than it cost him. Every victory we achieved came at a price. That made the next battle harder. The hologram showed a specific battle in one of the human settlements. Torres would sacrifice entire squads to eliminate a single one of our heavy vehicles. He would abandon strategic positions to lure us into traps. He would retreat from battles he could have won in order to preserve his forces for fights that mattered more. Tactical thinking, Dr. Kethver observed. Beyond tactical, Vexthal corrected. Strategic, long-term. He was not fighting for New Haven. He was fighting for the entire war. Every Zephyrian soldier his people killed was one less soldier we could send to attack Earth. Every vehicle they destroyed was one less weapon we could use against other human colonies. The commander returned to his chair and sat down heavily. But the worst part was not the military resistance. It was the civilians. I thought you said they were evacuated. They were, Vexthal confirmed, but they did not simply hide. They participated in the defense. Old humans, young humans, even their children. All of them had been trained to fight. The hologram showed the underground city, with its complex network of tunnels and chambers. Dr. Grant had organized them into support units. They manufactured weapons, treated wounded soldiers, and maintained the underground infrastructure. But they also fought when necessary. Civilians taking up arms violates the Galactic Warfare Convention, Dr. Kethver noted. The humans had never signed the Galactic Warfare Convention, Vexthel pointed out. They had never agreed to fight by our rules. They fought by their own rules, which were much simpler. What rules? Survival, Vexthel said simply. The only rule that mattered to them was survival. Not just individual survival, but the survival of their species, their culture, their way of life. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the final stages of the siege. After 3 months, we had taken most of the surface installations. The human resistance was weakening. I thought victory was finally within reach, but it was not? No, Vexthel said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was when they revealed their final strategy. Colonel Hayes contacted me one last time. He told me that if we wanted New Haven, we could have it, but we would have nothing left to take. The hologram showed the human settlements as they had appeared on the final day of the siege. They had rigged everything to explode, every building, every tunnel, every piece of infrastructure. They had turned their entire colony into a weapon. They destroyed their own world? They gave us a choice, Vexthel explained. We could withdraw and leave New Haven to the humans, or we could advance and take a dead world. There would be no colony to occupy, no resources to exploit, no population to govern. Only ruins. The commander stood up and walked to the wall, pressing his clawed hands against the smooth surface. I chose to advance. I thought they were bluffing. I thought no species would destroy everything they had built rather than surrender. What happened? They kept their promise, Vexthel said. Not turning around. When our forces entered the final human positions, Colonel Hayes detonated the explosives. The entire colony vanished in a series of explosions that could be seen from orbit. The hologram showed the aftermath, with the green planet now scarred by massive craters where the human settlements had been. We won the battle, but there was nothing left to win. The humans had chosen to destroy everything rather than let us have it. And the population? Gone, Vexthel replied. All of them, Dr. Grant, Colonel Hayes, Sergeant Torres, every soldier, every civilian, every child. They had chosen death over surrender. The commander finally turned back to face the historian. That was when I realized we were not fighting a normal war. We were fighting a species that would rather die than submit. A species that would burn down everything they had built rather than let an enemy take it. What did you do? I reported to High Command that New Haven had been taken, Vexthel said. But I also reported that we had gained nothing from the victory. The humans had shown us that conquest was meaningless if the conquered chose to leave nothing behind. Dr. Kethver noticed that Vexthel had grown more agitated as the interview continued. The alien commander's claws clicked against the table in a nervous rhythm, and his compound eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the walls of the medical facility. After New Haven, High Command reassigned you to the Proxima sector, the historian said, consulting his notes. The strategic importance of that region was significant. Proxima Station, Vexthel repeated, his voice carrying a tremor that had not been there before. Yes, that was where everything changed, where I learned that humans could think in ways that defied all logic and reason. The holographic display shifted to show a different part of space, where a massive structure orbited. A distant star? The station was enormous, clearly built for both military and civilian purposes, with docking bays that could accommodate hundreds of ships. The station controlled the hyperspace relay network for 3 entire sectors, Dr. Kethver noted. Capturing it would have given the Empire control over all faster-than-light travel in the region. Exactly, Vexthel agreed, manipulating the hologram to show the surrounding space. It was the most important strategic target in human space, other than Earth itself. High Command gave me explicit orders to capture it intact. The relay technology was too valuable to destroy. The commander stood up and began pacing around the room. The human commander at Proxima Station was Admiral Chris Baker. We had been tracking his movements for months. He was known for unconventional tactics, but nothing in his record suggested he was capable of what happened next. What made Admiral Baker different from other human commanders? He thought bigger, Vexthel explained. Other human commanders focused on individual battles, specific objectives, limited goals. Baker thought about the entire war. He saw patterns and possibilities that even our best strategists missed. The hologram zoomed in on the station, showing its complex structure in detail. When my fleet arrived at Proxima, we expected heavy resistance. The station was defended by a full battle group, including some of their newest and most advanced ships. But there was no resistance? Dr. Kethver asked. None, Vexthal confirmed. The human fleet had withdrawn to the far side of the system. Long-range sensors showed them holding position near the outer planets, but they made no move to intercept. It seemed too easy. The commander stopped pacing and faced the historian. I should have known it was a trap. After New Haven, I should have expected that the humans would not simply abandon such an important facility. But the station appeared to be completely defenseless. What did your scans reveal? The station showed minimal life signs, Vexthal replied. Perhaps a few dozen humans when it should have housed thousands. Most of the defensive systems appeared to be offline. The docking bays were empty except for a few maintenance vessels. The hologram showed the approach of the Zephyrian fleet, with dozens of warships moving toward the apparently abandoned station. I ordered a careful advance. My ships surrounded the station while boarding parties prepared to secure the facility. Standard operating procedure, Dr. Kethver observed. Yes, but nothing about fighting humans was ever standard, Vexthal said, returning to his chair. The first boarding party reported that the station's corridors were empty. No resistance. No booby traps, no signs of recent activity. It was as if the humans had simply vanished. The commander leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. But there was something wrong. The engineering section was sealed, and our sensors could not penetrate the shielding. When we finally cut through the barriers, we found that the entire area had been converted into something we did not recognize. What was it? A laboratory? Vexthal said. But not for research or experimentation. It was a construction facility. The humans had been building something inside their own station, something that required complete secrecy. The hologram changed to show the interior of the station, with a cross-section view revealing the modified engineering sections. What were they building? We did not understand at first, Vexthal admitted. The equipment was unlike anything in our databases. Complex machinery connected to the station's power core, with conduits running through every level of the facility. It looked like some kind of massive weapon, but we could not determine its purpose. The commander manipulated the controls to highlight specific areas of the station. Then we found Engineer Nicole Stevens. She was the only human left aboard. And she was not trying to hide. She was waiting for us in the main control room. Waiting for you? She wanted to talk, Vexthal explained. She said that Admiral Baker had left her behind to explain what was going to happen. She said that the humans had built something that would change the nature of the war forever. Dr. Kethver made notes on his tablet. What did she tell you? She said that the station had been converted into a hyperspace disruptor, Vexthal replied. Not just a weapon that could destroy ships, but something that could destroy space itself. She said that when activated, it would create a cascade effect that would eliminate everything within 3 light years. 3 light years? The historian looked up from his notes. That would include your entire fleet. And the station itself? Vexthal confirmed. Stevens explained that the weapon was designed to be used only once. It would destroy everything in the area, including the humans who activated it. The commander stood up again, his agitation increasing. I did not believe her at first. No species would build a weapon that guaranteed their own destruction. It violated every principle of rational warfare. But you came to believe her? She showed me the calculations, Vexthal said. The mathematics were beyond our understanding, but the basic principle was clear. The humans had found a way to destabilize hyperspace itself, creating a chain reaction that would spread outward from the station. The hologram now showed a simulation of the weapon's effect, with expanding rings of destruction spreading through the surrounding space. Why did she tell you this? She said Admiral Baker wanted to give us a choice, Vexthal explained. We could withdraw our fleet and leave the station alone, or we could try to capture it and trigger the weapon. She said the decision was ours.
What did you do?
I did what any rational commander would do, Vexthal replied. I ordered my ships to withdraw to a safe distance while I contacted High Command for instructions. The commander sat back down, his compound eyes reflecting the light from the hologram. But Admiral Baker had anticipated this as well. While I was communicating with my superiors, his fleet began to move. They were not retreating, they were attacking. Attacking what? My supply lines, Vexthal said. My communication relays. My support vessels. Baker had positioned his ships to cut off my fleet from the rest of the Empire. He was forcing me to make the decision alone. The hologram showed the movement of human ships as they struck at Zephyrian positions throughout the system. The humans were not trying to defeat my fleet in battle. They were trying to isolate it to make sure that whatever happened at Proxima Station would not affect the rest of the war. A containment strategy, Dr. Kethver noted. More than that, Vexthal corrected, a sacrifice strategy. Baker was willing to trade his entire fleet, one of the most important facilities in human space, and thousands of lives to eliminate my forces. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the final positions of both fleets. I realized that I had been outmaneuvered. If I tried to capture the station, the weapon would destroy my fleet. If I withdrew, the humans would keep control of the hyperspace relay network. Either way, I lost. So what did you choose? I chose to call Baker's bluff, Vexthal admitted. I ordered my fleet to attack the station. I convinced myself that the humans were lying, that no species would actually build such a weapon. The hologram showed the final approach of Zephyrian forces toward Proxima Station. Engineer Stevens was still in the control room when my ships reached the station. I watched her through the communications link as she activated the weapon. She activated it? Without hesitation, Vexthal confirmed. She looked directly into the camera and said that she was sorry it had come to this. Then she pressed the activation sequence. The commander fell silent for a long moment, staring at the holographic display. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. The explosion was unlike anything I had ever seen. It started as a small point of light at the station's location, then expanded outward like a wave of pure destruction. Your fleet? Gone, Vexthal said simply. 67 ships and their crews vaporized in seconds. The station, the human fleet, everything within the affected area was consumed by the cascade effect. Dr. Kethver stopped writing and looked up at the alien commander. But you survived. My command ship was at the edge of the effect, Vexthal explained. We lost most of our systems, but the hull held together long enough for the emergency pods to launch. I was one of 12 survivors out of a crew of 3,000. The hologram now showed the aftermath of the weapon's activation, with a sphere of empty space where the battle had taken place. Major Tim Rogers was Baker's second-in-command. We found his final transmission in the wreckage of one of their ships. He said that the sacrifice had been worth it, that the Empire would think twice before committing large fleets to attack human positions. The silence in the medical facility stretched longer than usual as Vexthal sat motionless in his chair. Dr. Kethver waited patiently, understanding that the memories were becoming more difficult for the alien commander to share. When Vexthal finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on the entire room. After Proxima Station, everything changed, he said quietly. High Command recalled what remained of my forces to the inner sectors. They said it was for regrouping and reinforcement, but I knew the truth. They were afraid. The holographic display shifted to show a map of Zephyrian space, with several systems marked in red. These were our forward bases, Vexthal explained, pointing to the markers. Supply depots, communication relays, staging areas for future operations against human space. We thought they were safe, hidden in systems that humans had never visited. But they were not safe? Dr. Kethver asked. No, Vexthal replied, manipulating the hologram to show the movement of unknown ships through Zephyrian territory. Humans had been watching us much longer than we realized. They had learned the locations of our bases, the patterns of our supply runs, the schedules of our patrol fleets. The commander stood up and began pacing, his claws clicking against the floor. The first attack came at Supply Depot 7 in the Rigel sector. It was supposed to be impossible for humans to reach. The base was 30 light-years behind our front lines, protected by automated defense systems and a permanent garrison. What happened? The base disappeared, Vexthal said simply. No distress signals, no combat reports, no survivors. 1. It was there. The next day our supply ships arrived to find empty space and debris. The hologram showed the aftermath of the attack with scattered wreckage floating in orbit around a barren planet. We sent investigation teams to determine what had happened. What they found made no sense according to everything we knew about human capabilities. What did they find? The attacking ships had used our own technology, Vexthal explained. Zephyrian weapons, Zephyrian engines, Zephyrian identification codes. The defense systems had not recognized them as enemy vessels until it was too late. Dr. Kethfer looked up from his notes. They captured your ships? Worse, Vexthal replied. They had learned to build them. General Patricia Cole had organized teams of human engineers to study every piece of Zephyrian technology they could find. Wreckage from battles, captured. Equipment, even the remains of destroyed bases. The commander manipulated the hologram to show technical diagrams and specifications. The humans had reverse engineered our entire fleet. They understood our weapons better than some of our own technicians. They knew the weaknesses in our armor, the blind spots in our sensors, the frequencies of our communications. How is that possible? Humans learn differently than we do, Vexthal explained. When a Zephyrian studies technology, we follow established procedures and protocols. We understand how things work, but we do not question why they work that way. Humans question everything. The hologram changed to show a human facility where captured Zephyrian equipment was being studied and modified. Dr. Patricia Cole's engineers did not just copy our technology, they improved it. They found ways to make our weapons more powerful, our ships faster, our defenses stronger. They were using superior versions of your own equipment against you? Yes, Vexthal confirmed, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they fought like humans while using our technology. They combined our superior equipment with their unconventional tactics. The commander returned to his chair, his movements showing the strain of reliving these memories. Commander Ryan Walker was their fleet commander. He had trained human crews to operate captured Zephyrian vessels. When they attacked our bases, they looked like friendly ships until the moment they opened fire. Deception tactics, Dr. Kethfer noted. More than deception, Vexthal corrected. They had learned to think like us when it served their purposes and like humans when it gave them an advantage. Walker's raiders could infiltrate our formations, communicate on our frequencies, even respond to our standard challenges with correct codes. The hologram showed a series of attacks across multiple star systems, each one targeting a different type of Zephyrian installation. The raids followed a pattern that we did not recognize at first. They were not random attacks or simple raids for supplies. They were part of a larger strategy. What kind of strategy? Starvation, Vexthal said. The humans were cutting our supply lines, destroying our communication networks, eliminating our ability to coordinate large-scale operations. They were methodically dismantling our capacity to wage war. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the extent of the damage. Captain Susan Clark led the most devastating raid of all. She attacked Supply Depot Kepler in the 438 billion system with a force of only 12 ships. The depot was defended by a full battle group and should have been impregnable. How did 12 ships defeat a battle group? They did not fight the battle group, Vexthal explained. Clark's ships approached the depot using captured Zephyrian identification codes. They docked at the supply platforms as if they were delivering cargo. By the time the garrison realized what was happening, the humans had already placed explosives throughout the facility. The hologram showed the sequence of the attack. with human ships moving through the depot's defenses without being challenged. Clark's people did not just destroy the supplies. They poisoned them. They introduced biological agents that would contaminate food stores, corrupt fuel supplies, and damage equipment over time. Biological warfare? Targeted biological warfare, Vexville clarified. The agents were designed specifically for Zephyrian physiology. They would not harm humans, but they made our food inedible and our equipment unreliable. The commander stood up again, his agitation increasing. The contaminated supplies were distributed to dozens of bases before we discovered what had happened. Entire fleets were grounded because their fuel had been sabotaged. Thousands of soldiers became ill from eating poisoned rations. This violated the Galactic Warfare Convention, Dr. Kethver observed. The humans had never agreed to follow the Galactic Warfare Convention, Vexville reminded him. They fought by their own rules, which were much simpler and much more effective than ours. The hologram changed to show the broader impact of the human raids across Zephyrian space. Within 6 months, our entire logistics network was in chaos. Supply runs required heavy escorts. Communication relays needed constant protection. Every base lived in fear of the next human attack. How did High Command respond? They ordered a general withdrawal to defensible positions, Vexville replied. We abandoned our forward bases and concentrated our forces around core worlds. The plan was to wait until the humans overextended themselves, then counterattack with overwhelming force. The commander sat back down, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic light. But the humans did not overextend themselves. They had learned from their earlier mistakes. Instead of trying to hold territory, they focused on denying it to us. Denial tactics? They turned every system they could not hold into a wasteland, Vexville explained. Mining installations were destroyed. Orbital platforms were sabotaged. Even planets were rendered uninhabitable through targeted environmental warfare. The hologram showed the extent of the destruction, with system after system marked as unusable for military purposes. The humans preferred to control empty space, rather than let us use it as a base for further attacks. They created a buffer zone of dead systems between their territory and ours. But this must have been costly for them as well, Dr. Kethver noted. Extremely costly, Vexville agreed. But they were willing to pay that cost. They understood something that we did not. In a war of attrition, the side that is willing to lose more will eventually win. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the positions of both fleets after months of raids and counter-raids. By this point in the war, both sides had lost hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. But the humans were achieving their strategic objectives while we were merely reacting to their initiatives. What were their strategic objectives? To make the war too expensive for us to continue, Vexville explained. Every raid cost them ships and lives, but it cost us even more. Every base we had to abandon, every supply line we had to protect, every fleet we had to recall from offensive operations. The commander stood up and walked to the far wall, pressing his clawed hands against the smooth surface. Commander Walker understood that the humans could not win through conventional warfare. They did not have enough ships, enough soldiers, or enough resources to defeat the Empire in a direct confrontation. So they chose unconventional warfare? They chose total warfare, Vexville corrected. They were fighting not just for territory or strategic advantage, but for the survival of their species. Every human soldier, every human ship, every human base was committed to that single goal. The alien commander turned back to face the historian. That was when I realized that we had made a fundamental error in our assessment of the conflict. We thought we were fighting a war of conquest. The humans knew they were fighting a war of extinction, and that made them more dangerous. The medical facility had grown cold as the twin suns of Zephyr Prime set completely, leaving only the artificial lights to illuminate the white room. Vexville sat hunched in his chair, his compound eyes fixed on the holographic display that now showed his homeworld, Dr. Kethver. noticed that the alien commander's claws were trembling slightly as he prepared to recount the final chapter of the war. The attack on Zephyr Prime was impossible, Vexthal began, his voice barely above a whisper. Our homeworld was protected by the largest defensive fleet in the galaxy. Orbital weapons platforms surrounded the planet like a metal shell. No enemy force had ever penetrated our inner systems. The hologram showed the impressive defenses around the Zephyrian homeworld. Hundreds of space stations, thousands of automated weapons, and a fleet of over 10,000 warships formed multiple defensive rings around the planet. How did the humans reach your homeworld? Dr. Kethver asked. Fleet Admiral Danny Martinez found a way, Vexthal replied, manipulating the hologram to show ship movements through seemingly empty space. The humans had been mapping our hyperspace routes for months, studying our patrol patterns, learning the schedules of our supply convoys. The commander stood up slowly, his movements showing the weight of exhaustion and trauma. Martinez realized that our defensive strategy had a weakness. We were so focused on protecting against large fleets that we had overlooked the possibility of small, coordinated strikes. How small? 50 ships? Vexthal said. 50 human vessels against the most heavily defended world in Zephyrian space. It should have been suicide. The hologram changed to show the human approach, with tiny dots representing their ships moving through gaps in the Zephyrian defenses. But these were not ordinary ships. They were modified Zephyrian vessels, captured and improved by human engineers. They used our own identification codes, our own communication frequencies, our own operational procedures. They impersonated your own fleet? More than that, Vexthal explained. They had become us. Every human ship in Martinez's fleet was indistinguishable from legitimate Zephyrian vessels. They knew our recognition signals, our standard formations, even the personal communication styles of our commanders. The commander walked to the window, staring out at the darkness beyond. The human ships approached Zephyr Prime as 3 separate supply convoys, arriving at different times over several days. Each convoy was expected and had proper authorization codes. No one suspected anything? Why would they? Vexthal asked, turning back to face the historian. The ships looked right, sounded right, and behaved exactly as expected. Admiral Martinez had studied our procedures so thoroughly that his people could execute standard Zephyrian naval protocols better than some of our own crews. The hologram showed the human ships taking up positions throughout the Zephyrian defensive grid. By the time all 3 convoys had arrived, Martinez had placed his forces at key points throughout our entire defensive network. They were inside our formations, docked at our stations, integrated into our command structure. When did you realize what was happening? When they began to transmit, Vexthal said, returning to his chair. Admiral Martinez sent a message on all frequencies, directed at every ship, every station, every facility in the system. He identified himself and his fleet, and then he made an offer. Dr. Kethver looked up from his notes. An offer? Surrender, Vexthal explained. He offered to accept the complete and unconditional surrender of the Zephyrian Empire. In exchange, he promised that human forces would withdraw from Zephyrian space and never return. The commander manipulated the hologram to show the positions of human ships throughout the defensive grid. He gave us 1 hour to respond, 1 hour to decide the fate of our entire civilization. What was High Command's response? Outrage, Vexthal replied. The Supreme Admiral ordered all ships to destroy the human vessels immediately. He called Martinez's offer an insult to the dignity of the Zephyrian Empire. The hologram began to show the beginning of a battle, with Zephyrian ships moving to attack the human vessels. But Martinez had anticipated this response. When our ships opened fire, they discovered that the humans had done more than simply infiltrate our defenses. What had they done? They had sabotaged them, Vexthal said. Quietly. Every human ship was equipped with devices that could override Zephyrian computer systems. When the battle began, our own weapons turned against us. The commander stood up again, his agitation increasing as he relived the memory. It was chaos. Ships that had been part of our fleet moments before were suddenly firing on their own squadrons. Weapons platforms that should have been protecting the planet began targeting our defensive positions. The humans had taken control of your entire defensive network. Not taken control, Vexthal corrected. They had taught it to destroy itself. The sabotage devices did not give humans command of our systems. They simply made those systems malfunction in ways that caused maximum damage. The hologram showed the progression of the battle, with Zephyrian forces turning on each other while human ships moved through the chaos like predators. Admiral Martinez had turned our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. The more powerful our defenses were, the more damage they caused when they turned against us. How long did the battle last? 4 hours, Vexthal replied. In 4 hours, the humans destroyed or disabled 90% of our defensive fleet. The orbital weapons platforms were either destroyed or captured. The space stations were evacuated or abandoned. The commander sat back down, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. But the worst part was not the military defeat. It was the realization that came with it. What realization? That the humans could have destroyed our homeworld completely if they had chosen to, Vexthal explained. They had weapons that could crack a planet's crust, biological agents that could sterilize all life, technologies that could make our world uninhabitable for thousands of years. Dr. Kethfer stopped writing. But they did not use these weapons? No. Vexthal confirmed. Admiral Martinez contacted us again after the battle. He repeated his offer of surrender terms. He said that the humans had no desire to rule over Zephyrian space or to harm our civilian population. What did he want? Peace, Vexthal said simply. The humans wanted the war to end. They wanted both species to return to their own territories. And never fight again. They wanted to be left alone. The commander manipulated the hologram to show Admiral Martinez's flagship, a modified Zephyrian battlecruiser that had been captured and improved with human technology. Martinez explained that the humans had developed the capability to destroy any world in the galaxy, but they chose not to use it. Why not? Because destroying us would not have solved their problem, Vexthal replied. The humans understood, something that we had never learned. Victory in war is not about defeating your enemy. It is about making your enemy decide that fighting you is not worth the cost. The hologram changed to show the aftermath of the battle, with damaged Zephyrian ships floating among the debris of their once mighty fleet. High Command had no choice but to accept the human terms. We could not continue fighting an enemy that had demonstrated the ability to destroy our homeworld while choosing not to do so. The war ended? The war ended, Vexthal confirmed, but not because either side had won. It ended because the humans had taught us that they were not an enemy. We could afford to have. The commander stood up and walked to the center of the room, facing the historian directly. Admiral Martinez came aboard our command ship to sign the peace treaty. I expected to meet a warrior, someone hardened by years of combat and violence. What was he like? He was tired, Vexthal said. More tired than any being I had ever seen. He told me that the humans had never wanted this war, that they had only fought because we had given them no choice. The hologram now showed the signing ceremony with representatives from both species gathered around a simple table. Martinez said something during the ceremony that I have never forgotten. He said that the saddest thing about war is not the lives that are lost, but the lives that could have been lived if the war had never happened. Did you agree with him? At the time, I thought he was being weak, Vexthal admitted. I could not understand how someone who had just won the greatest military victory in Galactic history could speak about sadness and lost opportunities. The commander returned to his chair and sat down heavily. But now, after months of thinking about everything that happened, I understand what he meant. The humans had proven they could defeat us, but they gained nothing from that victory except the right to be left alone. And what did the Zephyrians learn? We learned that there are some enemies you cannot defeat, Vexthal replied. Not because they are too strong, but because they are willing to pay any price to protect what they value. The humans showed us that conquest is meaningless if the conquered would rather die than submit. Dr. Kethver made final notes on his tablet as the recording device continued to hum. Do you think there will ever be another war between humans and Zephyrians? No, Vextel said without hesitation. Not because we have become friends, but because we have learned to fear them. The humans taught us that some victories are too expensive to achieve and some enemies are too dangerous to fight.